Welcome back to the Foundation C# course. We're currently in Module 2, and this lesson we're going to cover sets, in particular arrays. So let's go right into the code so you can see what an array is and then how to work with it. So we'll go to File, New Project. It's a console app. We'll call it Console UI. And this is Module 2. Lesson 7. The first thing we do in a console application is console.readline at the end. And if you're getting tired of this repetition, embrace it. Because the more you repeat a pattern in C#, the easier it is to make sure that you did all the steps. Because if you get out of that pattern and you start saying, oh, well, I'll do it later, or I'll whatever, then you forget. And then it's not a big deal on this. It'll just close out the console. But other times it can cause other problems. So I always have this pattern that I go in where every single time I do something. And I like showing that creating the console application over and over and over again. So you just, by the end, you're like, yeah, I got this. Creating a console application, I can do it in my sleep. Well, it's a foundational thing. So great. That's excellent. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you an array and how it works. So now think of an array as just a set of data. That's why we're calling it sets. This is the category we're in right now. So a set is zero or more things. Let's make a simple array. So we're going to create a string array. And when you do that, when we say string, we put the open and close square brackets at the end. Okay? And we'll give this a name. And since it's an array, meaning zero or more items, we call it plural, something plural. So, for example, instead of car, we'd call it cars. In this case, we'll call it first names. Okay? So it's plural, so we know there may be multiple in this item. Now, we have to initialize an array. And the reason why is because an array has to be set up for how big it's going to be. Okay? So it's going to say, how many things are you going to store? And you have to know. You can't just say, I don't know. I'll figure it out later. No, we don't want to do that. With an array, if you want to make it bigger, then you have to create a new array, move all the stuff over, and then add stuff at the end because it's the new array will be bigger. Well, as you can imagine, that's not cheap. So you want to make sure that we declare our array at the right size to begin with. So let's start off by declaring it and saying we're going to have 5 first names. So equals new string array, and we'll put 5 inside of square brackets. So what that did, it said, okay, we're going to create an array to put in first names. And it's going to be a string array. That's what the type is. Therefore, when we create something new to put in there, it's going to be a string array. The 5 indicates how many items are in this array or this set. So in this case, 5 items. Now we can reference these 5 items by their number. So for example, I'm going to hard code all of this. We're not going to fill it in with the console read lines yet. But for now, I'm just going to hard code it. So we're going to say first name, but you can't just say first names equals Tim. That won't work because this is a set, not one item. Instead, what you have to say is which element in the array. So we give it a position. So I'll say 0. And he goes, oh, that's cool. That first name 0 holds Tim. Now, why did I say 0, not 1? And the reason why is because an array is what's called zero-based, meaning for 5 items, it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. There is no element 5 because element 5 would actually be the 6th element. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at arrays. And this is a pretty common thing in programming is we count from 0 up, not from 1 up. So just kind of keep that back in your mind. always try to remember 0 based. Okay, so first name at position 0 is Tim. Now I can say, let's copy this whole thing. At position, well, let's do 1, is Sue. At position 2 is Bob. I could even skip if I wanted to and say, forget 3, we'll go right to 4, and that is Carl. Okay, so I'm missing one. That's okay. That third one's going to be null, okay, or empty. So now I have 4 elements in 4 different spots in the array, and it holds all of them. So if I wanted to, I could say, console write line, let's do a $sign syntax. And I'll say my array has, I'll do my curly brace and say first name at position 0, comma, and then we'll just kind of copy and paste these because it's easier than typing it over again. A couple more times. So 1, 2, and we skipped 1, so 4. Now, copying and pasting, that's something that's a little dangerous. And that's why I always recommend, especially as a new developer, that you really limit how much you copy and paste. But even as a mid-level developer, and even a senior level developer, copying and pasting is dangerous. If I had which I did, I pasted this 3 times. If I had missed one, that'd be a problem, okay? It would say Tim twice. And that's, that when we run this, it's going to say Tim twice. We go, oh, whoops, we missed this. But what if I had Tim in each of these spots? I wouldn't notice. Or what if I had Tim here? I wouldn't necessarily notice. And so I go as a production, all of a sudden we've got this bug in the code. Or worse, what if this is part of a calculation? I might be missing a part and not even realize it. And that's why copying and pasting is dangerous, because you have to make sure you look over it and find all the spots you need to change. So just be careful there. So let's just run this real quick, just to kind of show that it works. And yes, my array has Tim, Sue, Bob, and Carl. So now I have 4 different values in this first names array. So instead of creating 4 different variables, so first name 1, first name 2, first name 3, first name 4, I just created an array of first names and put them in the different spots. And that can be kind of handy, but not terribly. So there's other ways to use this. For example, if you look right above, check this out. We didn't type that. That came from the default template, string array args. And what that is when you run this application directly in Windows. So you get the command prompt, and let's just put it here in a comment. So we call this, let's just call it main app.exe instead of what it actually is. But we could say things like /p/r/t/test, whatever. And these would come across as arguments. Now, how many did I add here? Well, I added 4, but I could add 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 arguments and then come through in the string array. Now, you may wonder, well, how does it come through in a string array if we didn't declare the size? Well, what happens is it brings it in and goes, okay, I will break these apart into different sets. And then it goes, oh, I have 4 of them right now. Therefore, I'll declare an array of size 4 and pass that in to args. Whereas if I add a few more, whatever. Well, I have 232. There you go. So now it's got 6. Well, it would create an array of 6 items and pass it through. So that can be kind of helpful. Let me show you another way. And this will be a little more advanced. Not a ton, but I want to show you some of the possibilities with string array. So I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to show you something that we'll use again later, a few modules away, but can be helpful to see even now. What if you had a string that was, let's call it data for now. And the data list came from a comma-separated value list. Okay, so there's our list. And if you're familiar with CSV files or comma-separated value files, they're just text files, and they use commas to separate out the list. Well, what we can do is say string array first names equals data dot split. And what split does is it will break apart one string into multiple strings based upon a delimiter or a separator. So they call it separator. Now it uses what's called a char. We've been using strings. Strings are, they have characters, 0 or more characters. They can have lots of characters or a few characters. A char can only have one character. That's why it's char, short for character. So a char, we use a single quote instead of a double quote. But inside here, I can put comma. And now it will split this string based upon the comma character. And it puts it into, if you notice, string array. So now it's going to take these items here and put them into a string array. Now I can say console write line. And since I know what's available, I can say the third first name is first names. And what should I put in here for a number? Well, it's not 3, it's actually 2. Because again, 0 based. If we do the counting, 1, 2, 3. I know it's confusing because 1 is 0, 2 is 1, and 3 is 2. These are positions. So the third position is array number 2. So let's just run this and make sure it works. And in fact, it does. It says the third first name is Bob. Let's just verify that. 1, 2, 3. There you go. But what if I asked for the 7th position? Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We don't have a 7th position. So that'd be position 6 because again, 0 base, so just kind of subtract 1 from any number you want. If we run this, we get what's called an unhandled exception. So it says index out of range exception. The index was outside the bounds of the array. If you think that one through, that error message is actually very clear. What it's saying is, you gave me an index, that's the number we put in here. And it was outside of the bounds of the array, meaning the array has 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You gave me something outside of that. In this case, 6. And that doesn't exist. Anything outside the bounds doesn't exist. Therefore, it crashes the application. So be careful there of not asking for something outside of what's available. Now, a string is not the only array type you can create. I'm going to comment this out. I'm not going to create, actually fill it in, but I'm going to show you other types you can create. For example, int array. We'll say ages equals new int array. And we have to give it a number, so I'll say 3. So now you have 3 different spots. We can say int position 0 equals 4 int at position 1 equals 5, and so on. Oops, I'm sorry, not int. That's why it's yelling at me. When things yell at you, pay attention to why. In this case, I called it int. I meant ages. There we go. And also ages at position 2 equals 54. So that works. You can do the same thing with Booleans, which wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. You have a whole list of true and false. I'm not sure how you'd know which ones are which, but maybe it'd work. There might be a use case for it. It's probably not the most common thing. Usually we see a lot of string arrays, but sometimes arrays of other objects as well. So just know that the syntax is int or whatever type you want, and then the square brackets after it, give it a name, and then equals a new, that same type with the square brackets and the number of elements you want. There's another way, though, of declaring an array. So we can say, let's go back to string for a minute, string array, and we'll call this last names just to be different, equals new string array, and then no number inside, curly braces, and then a semicolon at the end. What this does, right now it doesn't do anything good, really. It's just creating an empty array. But the curly braces allow us to fill it in right now. So Corey, Smith, and Jones. So what I've done is I've declared a string array called last names. I set it equal to a new string array, but instead of giving a number, I gave it 3 values inside curly braces. And so it takes those 3 values and says, okay, that would be 1, 2, 3 elements. Therefore, it's going to say string 3. And it's going to put a 3 in here. It kind of assumes based upon how many you have. Now, I can say last names 1, and it would give me Smith. So I did console write line and said last name 1. Or I could also say Malcolm. All right. And what that'll do is it will put the value of Malcolm in the array position 1 or the second element, which would be Smith. So it's going to overwrite Smith with Malcolm. Now, if I ask for that, just like we think with a normal variable, if I said last name in the 1 spot, which is the second element, it would say it's Malcolm, not Smith. Smith is gone. So just like any other variable, you can overwrite it or you can append to it. So I could do plus equals. So that's how arrays work. Now, to bring up the pro tip for today, arrays hold existing data well, but there's better options out there. Okay, so I'm kind of showing you what is in C# and what is used. Like you saw it there with the method static void main, it passes in a string array of arguments. And there are times when you'll use arrays, but typically it's when they're already filled or you're going to fill them once, like with our code here. Let's go back to it real quick, where we said split. It fills an array for us. So that we might see more often, where we get the filled array and we use it to do something. But really, when it comes to most C# programming, we want to say that there's better options out there. So don't think that you're going to be creating a lot of arrays, more likely to be using them once in a while. But I do want you to see them because you will be using them once in a while. That brings us to our homework. And the homework is to create an array of 3 names and then ask the user which number to select. And the user gives you a number, return that name. Okay? So it's going to use some of the skills you learned before. This learning C# is a cumulative process. And that's why I always say make sure you do your homework, because if you didn't do your homework back in the if process or the variable process, you have a hard time doing this homework, because you've got to use those things that you learned in this homework. And we get into more advanced stuff like object-oriented programming and all the rest, that builds off this foundation. That's why this is called a foundation course. We're laying the foundation for everything you'll need to know to have the basics of C# handled, okay? You'll still learn more stuff after this course is over, but it's all going to be based upon the stuff you learn here. So the better you learn it now, the better off you will be in the future. So practice, practice, practice. And the way to do that, in this case right here, is to do this homework. Don't move on until you can do this homework and do it well. All right? And I will see you in the next lesson once you do.